Why would you come here to see me if you disagree so passionately with my views?
You've insisted all your lives that the very concept of God is ludicrous.
Yes.
Clash between God and Satan.
Ah, but I did not say whose side I was on.
I'm a huge C.S. Lewis fan, and didn't know quite as much about Freud, so it was neat to see that. So Matthew, maybe Mr. Brown, let's start with you. Set up the conversation being had between these two titans, and then also maybe how the material developed, since this wasn't a real conversation, but rather an idea of a conversation.
It came out of a university lecture series. It was a book Armand Nikolai created called it was called A Question of God. And he had this class for about 30 years. It became one of the most popular classes up at Harvard. And it was originally it was just about Freud and atheism, and then they wanted a counterpoint to it, and he decided upon C.S. Lewis, and he thought there might have actually been a possibility of a meeting between the two of them. So he used that, and it all of a sudden it just became totally dynamic. And so that went on for about 30 years, and it became a play, and then we obviously turned it into a screenplay and a movie. I was drawn to it by just the themes and what it didn't shy away from. It tackles the big stuff, and I love stories that do that. It's a little bit intimidating, but it was a great challenge, and one that I think is worthwhile, because I was really hoping that it could start some conversations, which I think at this time are very badly needed.
Matthew, good. Getting into the character of C.S. Lewis, how familiar were you with him, with his works, and then, trying to embody this individual?
I was aware of C.S. Lewis, the writer, as a child, because I read the Chronicles of Narnia. But I was aware of the older C.S. Lewis via my co-star in this, because he did a wonderful C.S. Lewis in Shadowlands, which is still a brilliant film and still a great performance. It stands up, like most of Tony's work seems to. It's very difficult to knock him as an actor. So a lot of the history is it's the joy of playing a part like this. It's been written down. There are timelines. We know when his works were published, etc. And he wrote a very nice book in 1955 called Surprised by Joy, which was very beneficial in a way. It's lovely to hear someone talk about their own childhood through their own words. Sometimes you read a biography of people and it's somebody else writing it. So I got an inkling of how his mind works and how he thinks, and obviously just the detail of talking about the sort of the traumas in his life, particularly those early years. That's what built us as human beings. So, but then I had a very nice script as well, which was very balanced. And you've got to throw all your research out, so to speak, and the thing that I was just very, very aware of is that I wanted to try to make sure I got his humanity right. I couldn't really do his voice, because he actually spoke his voice was it was quite different. There's still a recording of his voice in 1939 from his, which is on YouTube. But we had different bodies, I think, at that time. So, physicality, that is. So I just wouldn't have been able to do that. So, but I've got the rhythms of his language from that, and and the timbre, I suppose you'd say. So, but knowing it all, you just got to get in room with Tony Hopkins and see what happens. And it was a joy.
Speaking of getting in a room with Anthony Hopkins, there's tons of dialogue in this one. At one point, I was like, "Oh man, Matthew probably got the script and was like, okay, when do I get a break?" But,
well, yeah, there's a little bit. Tony's incredible, because he's also. I don't really want to talk about his age, but you can certainly look it up, and it's in his 80s. It's no mean feat to be choosing, to be making something 7 pages a day. It's a lot. We both learned the entire script before we came in, because it's the only way we could do it. It required a lot of time and effort. And it was great, particularly on his part. But listening brings its own different delicacies of strangeness, and yeah. But I guess if you're going to have to listen to someone do some big speeches, Tony Hopkins is the one you want.
No, you guys were fantastic together. And Matthew Brown, talk to me about directing the two of them. It's kind of a dance, and You did it such a great job. So tell me what that kind of looked like from your perspective.
It's just frightening when you think about it at the beginning. So we were I think it's a tribute to Matthew and Tony and just their collaborative nature and kindness and just patience that this was able to get done. I mean, as he was saying, we did close to 7 pages a day at times, and Tony is he's not a young man. And we needed to have the opportunity to make mistakes and fall down and get back up. And when you're on a super tight schedule like we're on, that's hard to do that unless you have a lot of trust. And so we did, and I was very, very fortunate that way. And then I think the amount of preparation that Matthew did, and he's very humble, and Tony, they did so much preparation going into this that it helps not only just with authenticity and everything else, but it gave us the ability to take chances because they were so prepared. So that was pretty amazing. And then it was just a joy. We had the first 3 weeks of the shoot were on the stage in Ardmore, which is the studio where Tony hadn't been. It's the same stage, actually. He was there 50 years ago on A Lion in Winter, and then he came back in 50 years later to do this film on the same stage, which was just remarkable. And our production designer had worked with him like 30 years earlier on Howard's End, and she was there, and she's also in her 80s. So that was really interesting. But yeah, it was a real joy for those couple of weeks when we were just able to have the crew stay away and let these guys do their magic.
Yeah, and talk to me, like you had mentioned, big themes like faith and logic and science and religion, personal growth and listening. These are not easy concepts for anybody to grasp at any time at any specific time in history. And this is set in 1939, but it's still relevant today. So maybe talk a little bit about that.
It's shockingly relevant. I mean, that's what's so sad about it. I mean, I suppose it's like how do people not learn from their mistakes, But we just continue to, as a human species, we're challenged to say the least. So we just have to keep on trying. But it's sad that it's so relevant. I mean, we're looking at tyranny abroad at the beginning of this film. That's wars. We're seeing two wars in the world right now. We're having religion is at the center focus of a lot of stuff, and it's at war with science in a certain respect at the moment, because there seems to be the loudest voices in the room seem to dominate. And I'm hoping this film actually lets people see that we don't have to be so polarized, and we can have conversation, and there's good things about both arguments to take from them, and there can be respect, which is what I'm hoping.
Matthew, I have to tell you, I've been a fan for a very long time, since Chasing Liberty, all the way through your career. And Robert Evans of The Offer still stands out to me as probably my favorite character that you've dived into. So I've got to know, are you, when it comes to selecting projects and scripts, do you look for, varied individuals? Do you like a certain personality type? Kind of, what does that look like for you?
Well, thank you very much, by the way. I mean, yeah, we've moved on quite a long way from Chasing Liberty.
Hey, but come on, it's my repertoire.
I guess you're always looking for something varied, and that might be because, that's a really interesting, it might be astronomy or something like that. Something that I like to think I'm intellectually curious. I mean, having Tony Hopkins, sometimes it's not necessarily that, it's about the other actor you want to work with. And I don't pick and choose. Some things are sort of, it's more like goldfish feed. Someone's thrown it in the water, and it just it just happens to come in front of me at the right time, because there's a lot of other fish in there too. And so, yeah, but I like never knowing what's coming next. But actually, one of the things that might come soon is a revisitation of Bob Evans, which would be, I don't know. I don't necessarily know if it's definite, but I'm kind of interested to see where I could push that character again. You don't often get to revisit things. So, and sometimes that's good, because I feel like we did him well enough the first time around, but if the idea is good enough, maybe.